let's try that again. Something went wrong. We got kicked out of Facebook Live there, probably a connection issue. So not knowing how far along we were with that, let me tell you what we have done in the first bit of the video. Really, all that's happened is we have done a second coat. Yesterday we had added our black and our Bohemian blue, and so far what I've done is added a second coat in both of those colors on here. So we've got the nice base, and we're just about to take a look at adding a little bit more color. So I have the two colors that I'm going to be doing that with. The Old 57, which is kind of a turquoisey color, and some of the Mint Chip, which is kind of a, I've got a little bit too much light, but now you can see that there is a bit of a color difference. So a little bit of that light minty chip color. And these bottles, by the way, are called FIFO bottles, first in, first out. And they are a great way of being able to save your paint, meaning it's going to keep it all nice and fresh and a little bit better than going in and out of cans all the time to get the crusty lids and pieces falling in. And so I'm slowly switching over for some of my main paint lines. But for some of the blending, adding a little bit more color on this, and I'll hang in there with you to show you the bottom. The top is going to be exactly the same, but we're just looking at dabbing a bit of color here, okay, in both of our colors. So get a little bit of that Old 57, a little bit of the Mint Chip. I'm not looking at having both be standout colors, but we're going to be blending those together. And to do this, we're going to use our spray bottle. So again, just in a nice misting from this bottle. It's not dripping wet. We don't want to soak the piece. We just want to be able to move the paint on the surface. If we got too much water on there, we would start removing paint. We would start coming back down to the base wood color, and then we'd have to paint again. So to do this, I've got a couple of brushes that I'm using. One, just my base brush, and I'm going to wet this a little bit because you can see I used it when I was doing the sides, just to be able to start the blending. And here I'm turning it up and down. So I'm only using the one edge of the brush because I want to have those colors mixing in on themselves. And I get that it just looks kind of streaky, and I might want a little bit more color in here. And you're just eyeballing. This is where you just get to play. You start to have creative license here with how much color you're adding in, where you're adding the color, and how that's working for you. It's roughly blended. Well, okay, so it's not really blended. It's just pretty streaky looking. But now we get to start to soften it a little bit. And you can see that I'm still dragging that brush in one direction, but it starts to soften it out a little bit more, blend it out a little bit more. And this is why, you know, when we started, I said that I would go back and do the drawers, the tops of the drawers, the edges of the drawers last, because I'm not sure until I finish the piece what color that drawer top should be. And if I have to, I'll kind of blend colors in there a little bit too. Now, when I'm blending this, it starts still looking a little bit patchy here, right? It looks a little too perfect and edged. So this is where we start coming back in with our black. Now I'm just kind of wetting my brush because there's already a fair bit of black on here. But this is where I just want to pull down. I want to start to feather some of that paint into there, giving a little bit more of a gradation. So I'm just going to be taking my black downward and feathering it down in. Okay, a little bit higher in some spots, a little bit lower in others, kind of a little bit more natural looking in terms of how it blends and fits in there. So you can see where you start then taking those edges that look a little too perfect or a little too edgy, and we start to soften them with pulling some of that black. And again, I'm just using the one edge of the brush. I'm turning it this way to come down and this way to come up, so that I've always got that clean back of it. Keep it a little bit softer, right? So that I'm not pulling up and down. I'm always pulling it in the direction of where I want some of that colored feathering to go. So even as I'm putting on more paint, I don't want a lot. So I'm wiping some off on the side of the jar. I'm using a little bit more water to kind of help it be able to feather up. And you can see where we could start to soften a little bit of those lines that would make it look like it wasn't as blended. And this becomes the trick. You can see that I'm not moving this paint so much, right? Because if I started merging it all together, it would just become one kind of muddied mess. I'd lose some of the intensity of some of those colors. So there's still a little bit of some of the spots with some of the lighter colors coming in, which is what I wanted, but without it being too harsh, right? It's not a definite streak. So we have some of the variation in color, which is what I was after. I especially wanted to have the darker outsides, because that's where, when we do some of our gold leafing, that's primarily where the gold leafing is going to be, is around a lot of the edging and going up some of the lips. So that black is really giving me kind of the foundational step or stage there that I need to be able to highlight some of the gold. And that was kind of the idea of this piece, of having it edged in the black, is to be able to help me with that, help it be able to set off some of that gold leafing. I mean, the idea of how I'm going to do the gold is still a little bit of a work in progress. I am looking at using a kind of a stamp to lay out the pattern, but I might try it on a board. I might paint a little bit of black on the board tonight and see how that looks, because I'm thinking that my stamp is maybe a little too small, too many little cracks and creases. In which case, if that doesn't work, then I will be taking a fine detail brush. I don't know why I always end up with a detail brush, but a fine detail brush, and maybe do some bigger cracks and movement on the piece by hand instead, and then apply the gold leaf to that. So I will trial it maybe tonight, and then before I start in on the piece, I will show you the board and show you where that kind of factored into some of my decision making. And I think that's useful for you to be able to see, is that you don't have to fully experiment 100% on this. And mostly because once I put the gold leaf on, I'm too lazy to have to sand it all off if I hate it, because then I will also be sanding off the paint. So I'm cool with the paint. I may have to touch it up or add a little bit more color with it. Perhaps we'll see once it dries where I'm going. But you can kind of see where I've kind of blended those colors in. And if you kind of look from here to here, it kind of intensifies the color a little bit more. And once we start adding some of that gold, it'll kind of merge those colors even more fully from where it is right now. So top looks a little bit more uniform or regimented. This looks less so, and a little bit more organic, which is the look that I was after. and we'll see where that takes us. I'm going to carry on and do the same thing to the top. I've got the two sides done, but I also have the very top to be able to do as well. And for that, I'll be up on a chair. It's not terribly high, but it's a lot easier for me to be able to get the blending if I'm looking down at it rather than just kind of sideways and across. So I'm going to get this blending finished on this piece so that when we come back, we can take a look at if there's more color that's needed, or whether we're ready to go with the gold leafing right off the bat. So stay tuned. We'll see how that goes. But either way, I will have my sample board ready to be able to show you tomorrow with how the gold leafing looks. And maybe you'll be able to help me make a decision as to which way to go. Hopefully it's really clear which way we need to go. Anyway, take care. I hope that you have an awesome day, and I look forward to seeing you back when we carry on with the next step. Take care.